Hey everyone, welcome to CIS 137, Class 17. So today we're going to go over how the internet works, very roughly, uh, web hosting, what that means, and deploying to Firebase, which is the web host we're going to be using. Now first, this is this is Class 17. This is the second to last week in the class. And if you think of your learning curve, how I imagine this course having been going is, you're like a rocket ship. In the beginning, you had to launch fast and hard, but now we're getting to the end where we're basically in space now, and it's going to go a little bit smoother now. Now you have all that foundation to work upon. So if you feel like you're comfortable with everything so far, then this next 2 weeks are going to be just icing on the top. And otherwise, there's an opportunity to catch up. But this is going to be still very relevant to what you need to do for web development. Just a lot less coding involved. So how the internet works. This is going to be a 100,000-foot overview. So I'm not going to dig into the nitty-gritty of everything, but just give you a general idea. The internet is basically built upon the internet protocol, which is IP. So that provides end-to-end communication between two devices on the internet. Now, the way that these devices talk to each other or find each other is through an IP address. Now, the current most popular IP address system is IP version 4, and IP addresses look like this. They have a number between 0 and 255 in each of these sections. Now, there are a lot of rules into what numbers can go where. I won't go into those, but it basically just looks like this. There's a newer version called IP version 6 that has a different looking IP address, and those will take over eventually because there's only 4 billion of these IP addresses available, and we pretty much already run out of space in how many uh, addresses have been handed out. Now, for mostly web browsers, on top of the IP protocol is the HTTP protocol. So this is the protocol we've been using for our APIs, where we've been issuing GET commands to get the weather from the weather API, for instance. But this is also the protocol that your browser uses to uh, pull down URLs and display them in your web browser, or to download a file or anything like that. It involves all those HTTP methods that we've seen with the GET, the PUT, the POST. And HTTP uses these URLs, Uniform Resource Locators, which are on the top of your browser. So what's the process that happens when a user wants to get a web page? So first thing that happens is that the user will type the URL in the browser, click on a link to pull up a URL. So this next step is going to be important for later on. So the Internet Protocol uses IP addresses, but we start with something like www.google.com, which is a domain that's more user-friendly, that people can remember. So there are these servers that can translate that domain name into a IP address, and those are called domain name servers, DNS. Now that's going to come into play in a later class when we talk about getting domains. This class we're not going to talk about that, but it will be involved somewhat. But the important thing to know is that these domain names map to an IP address for the most part. There are some, they can map to other things too, but mostly eventually you're going to have an IP address that a domain name is associated with. Then your browser does an HTTP GET request to the IP address with the URL that we initially typed in the browser. So when the server gets this response, or when the server gets this request from the client, it formulates a response. For instance, if the client is requesting a web page, then the server will return the HTML of the page. So that's all that markup we've been working with, and the client or the browser. I'm using the client to mean the browser, or the user, primarily the browser. The client reads the HTML and then displays in the browser, and it also scans the HTML for all the external resources it will need, such as the CSS file, images, and JavaScript files, and it will download all of them to the browser to display in HTML. So when the client views a response, the HTML is rendered in the web browser, and the user can click on links, they can interact with the page. But since we're using the single page architecture, SPA, the user downloads the entire site at once. So that can lead to some interesting interactivity where the user doesn't necessarily need to be connected to or make any more requests to our server after they download our page once. That'll be true unless we have external resources that the user will need to download when they visit a different page. So that's pretty much a 10,000 foot or sorry, 100,000 foot overview of how the internet works. I can go into more detail, but for our purposes, this is all we need to know for now. So next up, let's talk about web hosting, what that means. So as we saw in the previous section, when we are getting a web page from the internet, we are talking to a server from our browser, and we're requesting the website from that server. When we're working on our machines locally, when we run something in WebStorm, when we do yarn start or npm run start, our computer, our machine that we're working on, is actually being turned into a web server, and it's hosting up the page. And there's a special nomenclature for that. The name is localhost when we go there. So when we see the localhost 7070, for example, when we host our own page, that localhost means the current machine that we're on. And that actually resolves to an IP address as well. That's 127.0.0.1. So you'll see that when you're working locally, either localhost or 127.0.0.1. But if you want your page to be available externally to anyone on the internet, then you need to deploy it to your site to a different server than the one we're using just from yarn start. So you could use your own server. You could even use your own machine that you're developing on. Or if you have a business, you could have a data center inside of your business that you could host a web page on. So there would just be some computer sitting somewhere that you own. Or you could use a web hosting service, and that's generally called the cloud. So let's talk about what we need to consider when you choose an on-premise server. So most important part, if you're trying to host a website from your home, is that you have to be sure that your user agreement with your ISP or internet service provider like Comcast or whoever you have allows you to host a website from your house. There are a lot of rules for consumer broadband. So you just need to check through your contracts and your user agreements and make sure that kind of service is available. Another thing is when you're working on your home network, or if you're working anywhere, you need to get a static IP address. And static IP addresses can be pretty expensive, just depending on what you're working with currently. Generally, when you have a consumer broadband, the IP address is dynamic and it'll change periodically. So when you go to set up your domain with the domain name servers to point to your machine, you give it an IP address to point to your machine, and if that IP address changes, then when people try to go to your site, they won't hit your machine. They'll hit whatever IP address or whatever server owns that IP address now. So you must get a static IP so that situation doesn't happen. Another thing you have to do is you have to configure and maintain the server. You have to set it up as a web server and make sure all the patches and everything are up to date. And the server must be turned on so you're using electricity. And when you're working with your on-premise servers, you have to consider load capacity. So that means you have to, your CPU has to be strong enough, your amount of memory on the system has to be large enough to handle the amount of visitors that you expect to happen at any given time. So the main benefit of on-premise servers is that you have total control. You can put whatever operating system you want on there, as long as you pay for it, and you can really tweak things to your liking, however you like it. But the main drawback is that you have total control, and that is a lot of responsibility. You have to be wary of hackers, you have to be wary of the server going down for some reason, or electrical failures. You have to worry about your own redundancy. It's a lot of work to maintain your own servers. So that's why the cloud exists. So the cloud are basically servers that are managed by someone else, anyone else. And with our websites, good hosting can be really inexpensive because we don't really have a backend or a database involved with our site. So all we have are static files, and I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. But basically, the user can download all of our files at once and then run everything locally. We don't need a server on the back end download. So the cloud has many options. Hold on. Okay, that's weird. So the cloud, unlike on-premise solutions, if you put something on the cloud, you have a lot more options with scaling and considering your load capacity. You don't have to worry about the server being turned on. They'll handle the IP address situation, and generally you won't need to configure and maintain servers with cloud. So there are a lot of cloud options out there. I mean, if you search for web host on Chrome, Google, there are a ton of web hosting services. As you can see, there are all these: HostGator, 1&1, InMotion, DreamHost, GoDaddy, Bluehost, HostWinds, Liquid Web Hosting, A2 Web Hosting, RVikes Web Hosting. All of these, these will work. It's, especially with our app, our app is not complicated on the server side. It's just files. So any of these web hosts will technically work. Uh, but all these are going to cost money. You see a lot of these say WordPress hosting. Most websites you see these days are hosted on a framework called WordPress. So if you're interested in learning rapid web development for like, you can make some pretty complicated sites with it. You should look into WordPress. So that's pretty much a different option than React. And they usually provide a more designer-focused interface where you can, drag and drop items on your page. So if you're interested in web development like that, if you don't like React for some reason, then WordPress. It's very easy to build a site on there. And you actually build pretty complicated sites. So for instance, I'll give you an example of a WordPress site. Columbia Association. The site was completely built in WordPress. If you're going with WordPress, that involves a database. So the hosting might be slightly more expensive than what we're about to do with the React hosting. So these are all a bunch of hosts, but we're not going to use any of these. If you want to learn how to use any of them, you can go in and generally they all have their own directions, but they're all easy to follow. So two cloud options we're going to talk about are AWS, also known as Amazon Web Services, and Firebase, which is Google's offering in the hosting space. Now these two options, I picked these two options because one, AWS, I'm partial to them. I'm certified with them. The hosting on there is really, really cheap and free for the first year. And you can do a lot of other stuff with Amazon as well. So I like integrating with other services in AWS with my website. So I really like AWS, and I'll show you how to host a website on AWS, host one of our websites. Another option is Firebase, and I haven't really worked much with Firebase, but I've seen it used a lot in production environments. It seems very promising. It's done by Google, and there are other services just like AWS that you can integrate with. And it provides other things right out of the box that we'll talk about later. So let's jump into how to actually deploy a site to S3. So in AWS, it provides a number of web services, but the one we're going to use is called Amazon S3, and that's a simple storage solution. And it's basically, it provides something kind of like Dropbox on the web, where you can just upload files and they'll be available on the cloud. But you can configure your folders to basically act as a web host. So it will serve the HTML directly from S3, and you can run your website basically for pennies a month and have it be super reliable, highly available, and be able to handle any amount of visitors that are thrown at it. We're not going to go into the other services with Amazon, but if you're interested, let me know, and I can hook you up with some more resources on AWS. So creating an account is free, and I didn't pick AWS ultimately for you guys to host on because it requires a credit card to sign up. And I wasn't sure if you all had credit cards, but Firebase does not require a credit card, so that's why we're going to go with Firebase for our actual hosting. So I've already logged into AWS, so it's available. When you first go, it'll look like this. And we can see it's host a static website. We could go through that, but we're going to go through a simpler way first. So there are all kinds of tutorials on here how to use AWS, but it's going to be pretty confusing at first. So we're going to pull up S3. That's our storage solution that we're going to host on. I see in S3 that we have nothing in here when we start. It's just this big hero screen. First thing we're going to do is create a bucket, and that's where our files will live. And we'll just call our bucket what we really want the site to be. Something like www.cis137.com. We'll start with that. So we can name this whatever we want, but it has to be unique. No two people or accounts can have the same bucket name. So you'll have to pick a bucket name. It can't just be like demo. That's probably not going to work. Then you can choose a region for your bucket. And the default US East is perfect for our area because we are in US East. This is the closest region. We'll click next. This is all fine. Next. And create bucket. Now here's our bucket. The bucket's name is www.cis137.com. When we go to properties for the bucket, we can see this option over here, static website hosting. Click on here and we can use this bucket to host a website. Excuse me. So for our React apps, we need to do one thing here, and that is we need to redirect all the errors to index.html. The reason we need to do that, we need to set up index.html here too as well. The reason we need to do that is with our use of React Router, we are adding paths onto our domain that don't actually map to a folder on the server. You know, we're using a single page app. So when a request is made, it will add to one of those paths. The server will respond with an error page saying, we couldn't find the file. I don't know what you're talking about. But if we say the error page is actually the home page, index.html, then React will get a second chance with that, the path that was passed in, and it will display the correct page through React Router. So that's an important thing to do with a React project, a single page app, is to set the error document to index.html. So now our bucket is a website. So we can just click on this to view it, but right now there's nothing there. All right, so we want to revisit. I don't know why it's, because there's no file in there. We're going to deal with that in a second. So all right, let's deploy our website. So we built our website with Create React App, and it has this way to deploy the website built in. So to run our website, we use yarn start. And this starts the local server that I was talking about earlier on localhost that allows you to view your website. And that just looks like this. Localhost 3000 is our website, right? Yeah. Oh, it's not started yet. Let's give it a chance. Okay. So now our website is being hosted on our machine locally. Doesn't look like it's working at all. This must be a old version that's not completely, yeah, this isn't completely set up. This is the one that just does the weather, but it looks like the weather's not even working either. Oh, because my, it's gonna be a lame site, but it's still gonna be hosted. Let's see, hold on, I have another version on here. I thought this was the right version. Kill that one. Yarn start over here. So after we run yarn start, you don't even have to run it to do what we're about to do, but it's going to, we're going to use a different command to actually package our website in such a way that it'll be easy to deploy to S3. All right, here we go. This one has actual routes we can work with. All right, so you see we're on localhost 3000. So this is localhost port 3000. We didn't talk about ports, but those are important as well. You know, every machine can have multiple ports that it listens on. 3000 is the one we're using here. So let me close this. So back in WebStorm, we're going to use a command right here, yarn run build. So this listed as a production build on our instructions. We run yarn run build is going to run a module called Webpack that will basically combine all your code into, you know, condense it down into fewer files, and it'll package everything together as needed. So let's see what the compiled code looks like. So now we have a build directory inside of our project. And this has all of our public assets, so everything that was in here, public, the favicon, index, the manifest. And then it has these generated files, all of our JavaScript condensed down to one file, all of our CSS condensed down to one file. So if we go into these, we can see super condensed, not very readable, and then all of our media as well. So all of our images, if we had videos or audio, these will all be in this folder, condensed down. So now everything inside of here is our built website. So let's go ahead and upload that to S3. So we can press upload here. And we could drag and drop the files, or we press add files. Actually, I don't know exactly where those files are, so we're going to drag and drop them. So here's the build directory, and we can go ahead and drag all of these over. So we see our website has 7.4 megabytes inside of our static. Where the space is used, I'm not sure. And we press next. And that looks good. And we keep all this as is as well. And we're uploading. So now when we go here, it still says 4.3 a bit forbidden. Okay, so yeah, so I made a mistake. You need to put a bucket policy in here to allow everyone to read from the bucket. So we need to put our actual bucket name in here, which would be www.cis137.com. This is available from this site here. Just look for host website on S3. I'll pull up Amazon's. You need Amazon's documentation, or you can use this up here, but the Amazon documentation, permissions required for website access, you need to use this, and you need to put your bucket name in here. So this is not super simple. I feel like it was simpler in the past. And I still have an invalid resource here. So let me do the policy generator. Try this again. S3 bucket policy, allow, and then the principal will be star. That means anyone. And the thing we'll let them do is we'll let them get object. And then the bucket name is CIS, www.cis137.com. But it should follow the following format: ARN, AWS, S3, : cis137.com/star. So now we generated our policy. We can bring it back over here and paste it in here. All right, so let's try it now. Here's our website. So this is available on the internet now, and it has this long domain in here: www.cis137.com.s3-website-us-east-1. AmazonAWS.com. Now, in a later class, we'll talk about how to turn this into an actual normal domain like www.cis137.com, which is probably not available. I just picked that up just because, but we might have to pick a different domain that's unique. Otherwise, our website's working and it's hosted on S3. So that was how to set up web hosting with S3. And there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through for AWS, and then this bucket policy management and turning on the permissions. But ultimately, what you get from here is, hosted for, after you're out of the free tier, it'll just cost a couple cents in order to host your website on AWS, which is pretty incredible for website hosting. Usually the minimum you can find is like $5 a month. So this gives you a big leg up, and it works with their other services such as CloudFront, which is their CDN. So on CloudFront, you can host your website even faster, so it'll respond to requests more immediately across the globe. Even though our bucket is in US East 1, which is in North Virginia, if you set up CloudFront in front of it, then you can have instant access all over the world. So AWS, very powerful, but it's more advanced than Firebase. So what we're going to do is actually deploy to Firebase. And why are we going to do that? Firebase is actually free for small sites as well, just like Amazon. It's also reliable, which means it's highly available, so your website is probably going to not have very much downtime, if at all. It's used by businesses, so it's actually popular and in use today because of its ease of use and the power behind it. And for our purposes, it's really easy to use. It's very developer friendly. We can just deploy our site from the command line, and it will be available on Firebase. So first thing you'll need to do with Firebase is to sign up for an account. So if we go to Firebase page, we can see what that looks like. So here's Firebase. So this is not only works with our website, but it works with mobile apps as well, and it provides a lot of features out of the box. You can check from the pricing. It's free for hobbyists, and that's our purposes. It's going to be completely free. We'll have a whole gigabyte we can work with, 100 connections. We can do all these cloud functions and storage and authentication. And for our purposes, it's perfect. If we had a business, we would probably need this Blaze plan over here that would allow us to use as much as we want. We just have to pay for what we use. So for the Spark plan, that's perfect for what we're doing. So when we're deploying to Firebase, the things we need to do is create a project on Firebase, and then we need to follow the steps in the Firebase deployment that's available in the instructions in the README file in Create React App. And then we can look at this user guide for Create React App at the end if there's time. So let's do it. Let's deploy to Firebase. So open your website to the world. So we're going to go ahead and add a project to Firebase. We'll just call it CIS 137. Now you should read these terms. You can learn about how they share data. So when we say the Firebase is free, it's free just like Facebook is free, just like Google is free, in that they collect your data and they will use and sell it however they see fit. So it's free, but with that hidden cost of losing all your privacy. So let's go ahead and jump into that world. The first thing we did was create a project. And let's pull up the page while this is happening. We'll pull up the Firebase instructions on Create React App. And let's see. Okay, so I click the link, I replace that %23 with that hashtag over here. And here's are the Firebase instructions. So inside of our Create React App README, it talks about deployment right here. So it tells you to use npm run build and creates a build directory, and then you can set up your favorite HTTP server so that a visitor to your site can have index.html. And it talks about a static server, so it talks about setting up your own server here. And here's talking about the URL thing I was talking about. So if you want more information on how the React router doesn't work well with a lot of web hosts, here it is right here. And here's Firebase instructions here. So we signed up with Firebase. We created a project here, and now we're going to actually deploy to that project. So here we did install the Firebase client if you haven't already by running npm install-g Firebase tools. So let's do that. So go into WebStorm, and we'll actually use yarn, or we can use npm, it's fine. npm install-g Firebase-tools. Doesn't matter where we do this npm install because this -g will install it globally. This will pull the relevant modules from npm, and we'll look at these next steps. So we need to sign up for a Firebase account and create a new project, and then we need to run Firebase login and log in with your previous created Firebase account. So I'm actually using my work account. So let's actually put that over here. Try clicking on some things here just to check it out because we're waiting. Okay, here it goes. So I'm going to log in on my other screen just in case I get it wrong. So I'm going to type Firebase login. So this looks like it's down here. Firebase login. I press enter. It's going to pop up my sign in page over here, which is cool. Okay. I've had success logging in. This success page looks like this. Let me pull it over again. All right, so let's move on to the next step. So next step, we need to do the Firebase init. Firebase init. So we're doing this all in our main folder of our project. I assume this is supposed to say Firebase up here. So we're about to initialize the Firebase project. What do we want to do? Database, functions, or hosting? So we want to do hosting. Configure and deploy Firebase hosting sites. So we'll press down, highlight that. First, let's associate this project directory with a Firebase project. You can create multiple projects, but for now, we'll just set up a default project. So we could either create a new project here, or we can use our CIS 137 project. And that was it. So let's go to the next step. So it didn't tell me to configure as a single page app, but that's okay. So we already did npm run build, so we don't need to do that step, but now we're going to deploy it, our website. So Firebase deploy. Should have worked. Let's go to hosting. Make sure is it set up. Okay. Okay. So you're initializing. Which Firebase CLI features do you want to set up for this folder? Press space to select features, then enter to confirm your choices. You have not selected any features. Continuing will simply associate. That wasn't supposed to happen there. So let's try again. That's happening with any live demo you do. Stuff like that's gonna happen. So let's fix that. So Firebase. Let's go to Firebase and see what they say about this. Nothing was put up there. Pull it down here. It's good. If you run into this, you're going to know what to do. Okay, so let's try this one more time. Okay, that's what it was problem with. So I was just going down to hosting and pressing enter, but I need to follow directions better. You need to press space to select features, then enter to confirm your choices. So you can select multiple of these. We just want hosting. So I press space here and press enter. First, what do you want to use as your public directory? So if you look over here in the README, it'll tell you right here that you want to use the public directory as right down here, build. So this is our build directory. So instead of calling it public, public is also in here, but public, these are just our files that need to be bundled with our source files. And these are all bundled together inside of our build. So instead of public, we should have a build directory here. Do you want to configure as a single web page app? Yes, we do. So we'll go and put a Y in there, say yes. Then it's going to write build index.html, and the Firebase initialization will be completed. We can go ahead and overwrite that, that's fine. So now, after you create a production build with npm run build, you can run deploy using Firebase deploy. There we go. npm run build, we'll run that again. Run this as many times as we want. It'll automatically clean out the old resources and generate the new ones as needed. So now that we've built it again, we're going to go ahead and do Firebase deploy. So it's pretty nice and easy. We didn't have to interact with a website or anything. We could just do it all from the command line. And assuming it's all going to work here, we can pull up this URL. So this is our URL. It's cis-137.firebaseapp.com. And if we go there, this URL is a little bit cleaner than the one we had to deal with on Amazon. And the site is hosted. It's available on the internet now. So anyone with this address can come here and go to the site. Its current temperature is negative 460 degrees, so wear a coat. Yeah, this is our entire site. Open to public. If you look through these deploy instructions, there are more options, but then you'll see things like on GitHub pages, for instance, this little gem down here, notes on client-side routing. GitHub pages doesn't support routers that use HTML5 push state, for example, browser history, which is exactly what we're using in our project. So if the user tries to go to a section, a path in your site, then the GitHub is going to return 404, which is the not found response. So you'd have to use a different way of doing React Router and do some special configuration to get it to work. Heroku's a good option too. Heroku, sorry. Uh, this one looks very interesting. I haven't tried this one, but now seems like it's supposed to be really easy to use. So that could be interesting. You'll get a URL like this though. But Firebase, it's made by Google. You can trust it. Um, and we're going to use it for our site because it's free, easy to use, and it's going to lead into uh, Google Analytics later. So, all right, that's everything. We got our site deployed live to the internet. Yay! So once you do that, you can celebrate. You can, crack a bottle of champagne on your monitor to celebrate the launching of your website. I wouldn't recommend that, but you could do it if you were super rich or something. Any rate, project part 4 is due this Friday by 8 a.m. So make sure to get it in. If you have any questions, hit me up, and I'll be happy to answer them. Okay, have a good week, everyone. I'll see you on Wednesday.